we couldn't think of a better way to celebrate International Women's Day than with the story of the incredible Santina, an American living in Australia who used to work for Harley Davidson, now sells Royal Enfields, and is also about to head to the Salt Flats in South Australia to have a crack at an Australian land speed record on a bike built by her partner Will.
My name is Santina, and I've been riding motorcycles for 29 years. I started riding dirt bikes, and I had one of those weeks where it was like, I lost the boyfriend, I lost my home, I lost one of the dogs. He kept the bike, and I had sort of that crisis where I was like, what am I doing with my life? And a friend said, do you have any idea how your face lights up when you talk about motorcycles? Why don't you do something with that? I'm from a little town in Nevada. I call it a cow town. It's a very small town. I worked for my dad at the time. He had a restaurant and a bar. I was a bartender. The guys in my bar took bets on how long I would last, and the longest bet was 6 weeks. So I did my 6 months planning, packed up, moved to Phoenix, never been home since. I had taken a couple of auto mechanics classes at community college. I loved it. I loved problem solving. I figured if I wanted to do something with motorcycles, I needed more information. So it seemed like a logical choice, like you go to school to learn stuff. It was really hard. When I first got there, the guys in my class, they'd grown up in garages with their dads. They all were so far beyond what I knew, but I just worked really, really hard. So at the Motorcycle Mechanics Institute, it's factory training. So you start with like theory and your basic clinics, so you just learn, the basics of motorcycles. So you do that, get through all of your clinics, and then you specialize. So after my clinics, I went into Hontech. So I'm a factory certified Honda tech. I went into Suzuki, which was like the worst experience I had at the school. I had a friend that was doing Harley training, and the Harley instructor would invite you to his house if you wanted to work on your bike. He had a workshop, and so I went over there to help. And he said, you can bring your bike over here too. And I said, oh, I ride a Yamaha. And he said, well, we don't care what you ride. And I thought, you don't? Because what I heard about you guys is that you're horrible and you're brandists. And they were like, no, and you seem to know what you're doing. So you're welcome here. And I went, really? So I went back to Suzuki, where they called me Princess. They told me I'd know what 3-in-1 oil was because I used it on my sewing machine, and that I'd probably be really good with gasket sealant because it was just like frosting a cake. And I just thought, this is a terrible place to be. I'm going to go join Harley where they're nice to me. So I dropped my Yamaha class, and I took up Harley, and I took up engine rebuild and performance, and it was like I'd found my place in the world. Will and I, when we moved to Australia, it was a very lonely place the first year. And the first time we went out to the racetrack, I remember walking through the pits and going, oh, this feels like home. We know this is familiar, and these are our people. This is our community, and that was where we belonged. A few years ago, I went to a race. It was a road race, which I'm not really into road racing very much. But I was working it as an event, and I met Maria Costello, and she said, oh, are you racing this weekend? And I was like, oh, no, I'm not racing. Well, why not? It was the first time anyone ever asked me that. And I thought, yeah, why aren't I? And why was my instinct well, no, of course I'm not. And then I went down into the pits, and there was this really cool lady there that had a vintage Royal Enfield, Stacy, and she was like, you really need to try this. And she said, I have a suit that'll fit you. You can ride my bike, come down. And I just thought, people really want me to race, and just got my head thinking about racing. And one day, Will and I were watching On Any Sunday, again, you know, and I said, I'm ready to race. Like, I can do this now. I really want to race. And he said, the only thing I haven't done in my career yet is land speed, and I'd really like to build a land speed bike. And I said, I'll ride that bike, but I don't know how. So let's start drag racing again, and then I can get more comfortable, and then we can start testing the bikes and move forward. We started going out on Wednesday nights for Race for Real and just took stock 650s. Now, mind you, I'd been to the track thousands of times. I'd never faced the light. And I remember going out there and thinking, I hope I don't red light, I'll be so embarrassed, right? Like, that was the concern I had. And I rolled up to the line and my knee was shaking so bad. And I thought, I hope no one can see that. I don't know how they could have missed it, right? And, you know, red light was so far from the actuality. It was like, oh, wow, that turned green real fast. I should probably do something about that, you know? And I made my first pass. And I remember thinking, this was like this perfect Zen-like moment of clarity, whereas like the colors were brighter and I just felt like whole. And so we come back around, we get back in the queue, and there's like 100 cars there. And I look up at Will and I said, well, this is ridiculous. I'm not gonna get any good racing if we just sit around waiting to race. Like, we're gonna have to build a racetrack. And he said, you've made one pass. You've made one pass and we're building a racetrack. What have I done? We knew early on we weren't going to be racing stock 650s. By then, I think there was some talk about S&S making big bore kits. And, you know, we started transitioning the bike pretty quickly. It was like, you know, first the mufflers came off. I was like running just open stock headers. Then we put struts on, so I'd just get used to riding without shocks. And we put a little wheelie bar on, so I'd get used to it being back there. Put a cam in it. So just little by little, we made these transitions so I could adapt to riding the motorcycle. And then we built Double Tap. So Double Tap is a Continental GT chassis. We had an extended swing arm built for it with an offset sprocket so that we can run a wider rear tire on it. And so I started racing Double Tap. The problem I had with it is it's a really tall motorcycle. And so, you know, launching a drag bike is just a huge part of the race. And I am on my tippy toes, sort of bouncing back and forth, trying to get a good launch. And so that was something that I always struggled with. Revelation is the most magnificent motorcycle I've ever ridden. It is, so it's our own chassis. We built it. I happen to be married to just a genius technician. So he built the frame and then he designed a stroker engine for it. So we still had the S&S big bore, but then we stroked it as well. So we put a 965 in it. It has our own Revelry Racing throttle bodies and big valve cylinder heads. But the whole motorcycle was designed to suit two purposes, at drag races and at land speeds. So when we were making it, it was like we made it with two of a lot of things so that we can just switch it over between whatever that we're doing with it. It's beautiful and light, but I mean, just having a motorcycle that fits just changes how I ride it and the confidence that I have to ride it, because I'm not overcoming that hurdle of trying to adapt to a motorcycle that just doesn't work for me. There's really only 3 places in the world that are ideal for land speed racing. Bonneville, of course, Bolivia, and Lake Gardner, South Australia. And so, you know, a 20-hour drive from here is one of the most beautiful places on earth, where 1 week of the year, they let a bunch of gearheads come out and see what is possible. So currently, The fastest Royal Enfield in history that we've been able to find is 193 miles an hour. So that's really the goal, is we believe we've built the fastest Royal Enfield ever. But 200 miles an hour is sort of that magic spot. So if we could pass 200 miles an hour, that would just be glorious.
You can follow Santina's journey at Lake Gardner on Instagram at Revelry Racing, and we will be sure to let you know how she goes on our Instagram and on the Biker Talk community page on Facebook. See you next time, and remember, you can't buy happiness, but you can ride a motorcycle, and that's kind of the same thing.